Good morning, everyone. This is Tim Ruiz from Strong Hearted. I'm the Victim Services Liaison here. I'm going to give a quick introduction with Adam. We'll start in about a minute, give a minute for some people to log in. So just bear with us for a second. All right. Good morning, everyone. Like I said, my name is Tim Ruiz. I am the Victim Services Liaison here with Strong Hearted Native Women's Coalition. Welcome this morning to our Student Safety in an Online World with Adam Dodge. Adam is the founder of NTAB.org, Ending Technology Enabled Abuse. Adam's work is characterized by his dedication to addressing the existence and future threats posed by technology to victims of crime and gender-based violence. He has written extensively on technology-enabled abuse, non-consensual pornography, co-authored a domestic violence advisory on the emerging threats of deepfakes, and created the first resource guide for victims of non-consensual deepfake pornography. Adam spends a great deal of his time delivering innovative technology-enabled abuse trainings to victim serving organizations and government agencies around the world. As a former legal and technology director of a domestic violence nonprofit, Adam led a department that processed over 1,100 domestic violence restraining order cases annually. Dedicated to advancing impact legislation and public policy, he sits on the Policy Advisory Council for the California Partnership to End Domestic Violence. He co-authored the Empowered Women's Guide to Divorce and has contributed to features in the Washington Post, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Self Magazine, Los Angeles Times, Gizmodo, GQ, and others. He also writes for the Huffington Post, and his television appearance included with Dr. Phil. A frequent speaker and lecturer at universities and national conferences, Adam earned his BA from UC Santa Barbara and his JD by way of McGeorge School of Law and Hastings College of the Law. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Adam.
Thanks, Tim. I'm going to start off by apologizing for making you read that long bio. That is not, we got to shorten that up. I apologize. That's way too long.
All good.
It makes me sound way too interesting. but I appreciate it. Very excited to be here back with another training for Strong Hearted. I just love this organization and love talking about this subject, which is centered around the ways in which technology is misused or weaponized to commit acts of harm against victims of intimate partner violence or sexual violence or gender-based violence, or stalking, or human trafficking, because technology has really become ubiquitous in our lives. We use technology, especially now during the pandemic. We are, this may have been a training that we did in person had it not been for the pandemic, and so we've all been forced to embrace this sort of new normal. And I was doing these trainings well before the pandemic because I was both simultaneously fascinated and alarmed by the myriad of ways that technology was showing up in the domestic violence cases that I was working on, and how I didn't really feel confident in addressing it. I didn't have the skills, I didn't have the resources to help prevent it or respond with confidence when it showed up in my cases. So today we're going to talk about student safety in an online world, and that's particularly relevant because so many students are now learning online. And when we go online, it just creates a host of different risks and issues that we need to be aware of, that we need to be concerned of. So I'm going to go through a few housekeeping. We already spent more than enough time on my background. In essence, the last thing I'll mention is I'm not a tech expert. I didn't work in Silicon Valley or in technology or in cybersecurity or anything like that. I'm a licensed California attorney that focuses on gender-based violence issues, and spent probably the last 5 years remaking myself into somebody who is tech savvy to the ways in which people are harmed online and via their devices in these gender-based violence dynamics. My pronouns are he, him, and just a bit of a content warning. We are going to be talking about abuse and online abuse and domestic violence and things like that. So if that is activating or touches on anything that makes you feel uncomfortable, please feel free to step away or mute the screen or mute my voice, and take all the time you need if we're covering something that you find uncomfortable. Questions and input. This is my favorite part of presenting. I want to hear from you. I want to hear what you're thinking about. I understand that there was an incident recently in the community related to basically online trafficking or online stalking, where two minors were lured by somebody online into a situation that may have been or was unsafe for them. I don't have all the details, but do know that this occurred online, which is absolutely something that's unfortunately something we see quite a bit of. The social media and dating platforms and the internet and so on and so forth, messaging apps, have really acted as a gateway for individuals to contact minors that they wouldn't otherwise be able to contact, but for this technology. It may be somebody that lives on the other side of the country or in another part of the state, and this technology allows them to contact people, to groom them, to show up as pretending to be somebody else, impersonating somebody in an effort to get close to a victim, in many cases somebody who is under the age of 18, in an effort to to basically harm them in one way, shape, or form. So if you have any questions about that, or anything I'm talking about, or anything that I'm not talking about, feel free to enter it in the question portal or in the chat, and I'm happy to pause whatever I'm talking about to address what you all are interested in. So yeah, I really hope I get to hear from you, and would love to delve into anything that you're thinking about. Okay, so whoops, skipped ahead there. So, I would be remiss in not discussing the pandemic impact when it comes to technology and the way it's used to harm folks. And really, the pandemic impact is in my mind has had a very clear has touched our lives in a very clear way, touched the lives of minors or students in a very clear way, and that it's ushered them and those seeking to harm them online. Students and young folks or minors, teens or tweens were already spending a ton of time online before the pandemic, but now they've really been pushed online in a way we've never seen before. They're going to classes, study groups, they're socializing, it's how they're dating, it's how they're getting their entertainment at levels we've never seen before. And what we know is that victims are harmed where they are. And right now, where underage victims are is online and on their devices. So it's very logical that people would seek to contact them or harm them in that way. And I'm not just talking about strangers. I'm also talking about people close to a student or a minor in, let's say, a dating relationship, reaching them through their device or through their accounts or through social media. It's very normal these days. And as a result, it's where a lot of harm is being experienced. And unfortunately, the digital safety of minors and really folks in general is not being prioritized in the way it should. We're very, I think, aware of our physical safety, but our digital safety is sometimes a little just out of view or just not weighed as heavily. But as you basically can see from the incident that happened in the community, what started as an issue centering around the digital safety of these two teens, or I don't even know how old they are actually, but minors, started as a digital safety issue that led to endangering their physical safety. So we really need to be thinking about and prioritizing digital safety, because it's like I said, if you're spending that much of your time online and on your devices, then we really need to be forward thinking about being safe and how we can prevent those types of things. So we're seeing all sorts of issues come up in whoops. Looks like my screen just decided to make an exit there, but looks like we're back here. But yeah, we're starting to see things where students are getting harassed in study groups or online via chat, or we're seeing their screens getting recorded that record other students unknowingly and without their consent during study groups or online dating or online communicating or FaceTime or any kind of video chat or anything like that. So these are just all new things that while I think we probably could have predicted, they're things that we haven't, or issues that we haven't really spent a lot of time historically dealing with. And that's a lot of what we're going to talk about today. Because the thing we all have to remember is, in today's world, technology is required to survive and thrive no matter how old you are. A lot of the issues things that I'm going to be talking about today are perfectly relevant for people who are not minors, who are over the age of 18. Our digital safety and well-being is a priority really throughout our lives. And if you can't access technology safely, or you don't feel safe using your accounts or using your devices, then it really impairs your ability to function in today's world. If you don't feel comfortable or safe using, let's say, a laptop or a computer, and you need that device to work, that is a sign that we could be dealing with economic abuse and a variety of other things. So really, technology, especially today, touches our lives in just so many ways. This is a slide I created because I started thinking about, one of the first things that I think most of us do when we wake up in the morning is we get on our phones, and that starts a pattern throughout the rest of the day where we're plugged into our technology. And talking to folks and examining my own life about what I use technology for just on my phone, between social media or getting my news or my calendar or connecting with my community, or working, or learning, or exercising, or shopping, or managing my health, or getting from point A to point B, or ordering food, or getting a Lyft or an Uber somewhere, or paying my bills. I use it for everything. And if that was compromised in some way, or I didn't feel safe navigating those apps, that would affect my life in so many ways, and really, it'd be like trying to be successful with one arm and one leg tied behind the back, because and this is true for students as well. If they're not comfortable, if they're getting bullied or online, or they don't feel safe because somebody might be recording them or threatening them online, then that's going to impair their ability to learn. That's going to impair their grades. That might lead to depression. That might do a variety of different things. And that all, again, centers around their digital safety. So really, I'm going through this to really make sure that we all appreciate the role tech plays in our lives, how reliant on it we are, and what can happen if we're not safe, or somebody seeks to harm us through our technology. Because I just generally, in my experience, we're very adept at using our devices, right? We can get on our apps, we can use those apps, we can use GPS to get from point A to point B with a map app, we can message someone, we can create photos, edit photos on social media apps, we can do all these different, we can order food, we can change passwords, we can do all these different things. But when it comes to our safety, it's like, well, how do you know which apps are tracking your location? Or are you sure that your contact information is current? Somebody hasn't gone in and manipulated that. People are like, I don't even know where to check that. And so it's just sort of this interesting status quo where we're very tech savvy until our devices or our tech is used against us. And then I feel like, a lot of folks, their tech savviness minimizes a little bit, and it doesn't have to be this way. You do not have to be experts in technology. As I said, I'm not an expert. You don't have to be experts in technology to engage with a student or with a child and their technology, and speak with them with confidence about digital safety. It's really about talking about these issues, because at the end of the day, the underlying issues, or the underlying healthy behaviors surrounding a lot of these things have nothing to do with technology. Bullying has been around a long time. It just got supercharged a little bit by technology. So I keep referring to technology-enabled abuse. What is that? So let's take a little bit of deeper dive here. So technology abuse is not new abuse. It's the same abuse. It's just a different wrapper happening on a digital landscape. So now bullying is cyberbullying, and harassment is online harassment, and stalking is now cyber stalking. But at the end of the day, it's still stalking, it's still harassment, it's still bullying. But that's not to say that technology doesn't have an impact here. So under number two, it oftentimes makes perpetrating these forms of abuse against children easier to commit. Sticking with cyberbullying, it removes barriers. It used to be that a child would, when I was growing up, if I was getting bullied or a friend of mine was getting bullied, when they got home from their day at school, the bullying stopped, and there was a safe space. That is no longer the case. Now, it's very convenient for somebody to engage in bullying behavior against another student, because they can just do it via social media, or via a gaming site, or via a messaging app, or a text message, or something like that. And that technology is very accessible. Most folks have access to technology, whether it be access to a computer or a smartphone or some other device. And so, while it's very sophisticated, powerful technology, it's very accessible to all of us. And sometimes that abuse can be anonymous, meaning that kids can be bullied without the other party divulging their identity, because these platforms, social media or email platforms, allow for the creation of fake accounts or anonymous accounts without verifying their identification. So while it's very easy to create an account that protects my identity, and allows me to anonymously harass somebody, it's very difficult for that victim that I'm harassing to unmask me, because the Googles and the Instagrams of the world are not going to give that information up without, at the very least, a subpoena from a law enforcement agency. And finally, it's invisible a lot of the time. I can't tell you how many times I've worked with a victim, minor victims, older people that are over age of 18 who had no idea that their accounts are compromised. And I'm sitting there working with them, and no, they don't, they don't see somebody following them. They didn't experience any kind of physical abuse, but their accounts are being monitored by a current or former dating partner, for example. And that is really unsafe. That puts a lot of different things at risk, because as I mentioned before, we do so many things through our devices. And so if somebody has access to one of those devices, then they can really, if they want to engage in unhealthy behaviors in a dating relationship, that gives them so much access to do that, and it creates a really unhealthy environment for that student. Finally, the harm is on the order of magnitude of the harm is often greater. These acts are very repeatable. Whereas, again, staying with cyberbullying, if somebody went home from the day, is threatening that child or that teen, suddenly becomes a lot more difficult until the next day at school. But now you can just continue over and over again, get them on social media, get them on a gaming app, get them on a messaging app, things like that. So it's repeatable and it's far-reaching. Even if I'm at home, I can still reach the person I want to bully in their home, and it can be public. You can publish private information or intimate images about somebody else for all to see, and that can be really humiliating for the victim. That can damage their reputation, and once it goes online, it's permanent, and that information sits online forever, and it's perpetual. It can continue to harm. The victim just by being out there on the internet. For example, if somebody shared an intimate photo with somebody else and they decided to harm that person by publishing it online, we call this image-based abuse or non-consensual pornography. That photo may show up when a prospective employer or college is doing some research on that individual, that may show up and damage their job prospects or their academic prospects. So understand that. I'm not trying to paint a doom and gloom picture here. It's just really important that we understand the dynamics of this, so that when we're talking to students or we're talking to teens, that they really understand the impact, because there is this sort of social norm now that sharing private information or sharing intimate or nude photos or videos is, something people do, and it's maybe no big deal. And look, when I'm talking to people that aren't minors, I say, look, I'm not here to judge you for sharing intimate images in a consensual relationship with a partner. With teens, it's a different story. I really don't think they should be doing that until they're of age. And then even then, it should be an informed decision. I can't tell you how many times I've heard folks say, I had no idea when I shared that image, or I allowed this person to take this image of me with my clothes off, that this photo would haunt me for the rest of my life, or it would affect my job prospects. And that breaks my heart, because they really should be, and we should be talking to students and our children about this, that look, if you do that, if you're going to do that, you need to understand the repercussions. And this is not a new concept. It's like talking to them about getting them behind the wheel when impaired, like understanding that if you do that, you could kill somebody, you could go to jail, it could ruin your life. And so that they really understand the ramifications of taking stuff like that. We need to take that same approach and apply it to this, because absolutely it's something that can haunt them for the rest of their lives and impact the rest of their lives. And at that age, they still got a lot of life to live. And so having that following them around and hanging over their head is really damaging. So really making sure that folks understand the ramifications of their actions, even if they don't seem like a big deal, is important. And as I'm going to get into, this new and online environment really has created pressure on primarily women and teens to engage in the exchange of nudes or engage in online sexual intimacy. In fact, there was a study that came out recently that says 1 in 4 teens has exchanged nudes or sexted with somebody. So that's a pretty powerful that's a pretty powerful stat, and because so many teens are engaging in this behavior, the risk of image-based abuse or extortion, or like they say, sextortion, if you don't do something, I'm going to publish this photo, increases dramatically. So again, not trying to scare anybody, just I think we need to all be a little more tech savvy about how digital abuse or tech-enabled abuse or online abuse works so that we can have these conversations. Because I know that when people appreciate the order of magnitude, the risk of doing these things, they may still do it, but they may not, because it's just not worth it. And if no one's talking to them about this, about these implications and these impacts, and they're only hearing about it from their friends, well, all my friends are doing this, and my partner really wants me to do it, so I'm just going to do it. It doesn't seem like a big deal. No, they would never do that to me. But then you hear stats like 1 in 12 Americans identifies as a victim of image-based abuse or non-consensual pornography. And that has been greatly influenced by the fact that people are exchanging these intimate photos and images so much. So having these conversations, being comfortable having these conversations is just so critical. I'll give you an example of a non-consensual pornography example to sort of understand or highlight the role that technology has when abuse goes digital. So in this circumstance, this is not involving a teen. This is involving a young mother, though, who is in a contentious custody battle with her husband, her ex-husband. And during the marriage, they had taken a lot of intimate photos. He had taken a lot of intimate photos of her. She had never asked him to do it. It was an abusive relationship, and she felt compelled to participate in this. And he said that he would release those photos if she didn't agree to things in the custody battle that he wanted. And he gave her a deadline, and the deadline passed. And the next day, she didn't comply with him. And the next day, she walked outside, and underneath the windshield wipers of all the cars in her apartment complex were nude photos of her with her name and phone number. And so she went around and pulled them all, grabbed them all as best she could, and she felt like she got most or all of them. But then a couple of days later, she started getting text messages from strangers with the photo. So clearly people had that some people had gotten those photos and that they had started to disseminate, and somebody had put them online. And as soon as they went online, she started getting emails she got from people she knew. Is this you? People harassing her. And once the abuse went digital, once the abuse went online, the harassment increased, the permanency of the abuse activated, because now once that photo's online, you can't scrub the internet from that photo. So it really became more powerfully abusive and more harmful for her when the abuse went digital. And that's very true with a lot of forms of abuse, like bullying or harassment or online threats and abuse types of that nature. So that's just, I hope illustrates and really drives this point home that we need to take technology very seriously when it crosses over into abuse. So let's talk about the evolving landscape of tech-enabled abuse, and I'm going to provide some statistics here, because again, I think this presentation is about awareness raising, so you can feel like you have a good handle on what's going on out there, and it's not just this giant technological or online space, and it can be very intimidating. I want to provide a little detail about what we're seeing and what the statistics are saying. So tech-enabled domestic violence or tech-enabled intimate partner violence has been rising for quite some time. 97% of domestic violence agencies report that technology is used by perpetrators to abuse. The National Domestic Violence Hotline reported a 101% increase in digital abuse calls. And it makes sense because 81% of US adults are online daily, probably much higher now. And 94% of adults ages 18 to 49 on a smartphone, and 97% of teens ages 13 to 18 own a smartphone or have access to a smartphone. So it makes sense that, and again, I bet that's higher now. So it makes sense that, as I mentioned before, people are going to be abused where they are, and when they are online and they are on their smartphones, that's where the harm is going to take place. But it's not limited to intimate partner violence, human trafficking. 75% of underage victims report being advertised online. Older Americans, 60 and above, the FBI's annual cybercrime report always reports that Americans 60 and above are the #1 targeted age group for cybercrime. It's not even close. Sexual violence, 40% and 41% of women report online sexual harassment. And as I mentioned before, revenge porn or non-consensual pornography, which by the way is the sharing of an intimate image or video of somebody without their consent. 1 in 12 Americans identify as victims now. And then finally, cyberbullying. This is according to the Pew Research Center. I've got a different stat I'm going to show you all in a bit, but according to the Pew Research Center, 59% of teens report experiencing cyberbullying. So 6 in 10 essentially teens report experiencing name calling or threats or false rumors. That's a huge number. I think it's higher than that, especially these days with so many students online. But that right there, I think, more than anything else, that stat tells us that we need to be talking to our kids and our students about digital safety, because at the end, it's still bullying. You take cyber out of there, it's still bullying. But that's not to say we shouldn't be talking to them about how to stay safer on their devices. And it doesn't have to be complicated, as we're going to talk about here. Just a few other stats. A recent study came out that 46% of respondents reported online stalking behaviors, checking a partner's phone without their consent, or checking their search history, or or creating fake profiles to monitor them. And 34% of college students report experiencing cyber harassment. And as Tim mentioned in my bio, I've done a lot of work around non-consensual deepfake pornography, which is a technology that's becoming very mainstream, where people take a photo of somebody and are able to face swap that person from their photo onto a video of somebody else in another video. And what's happening is they're taking pictures of women and putting them on the bodies of women participating in a pornographic film. So it makes it look like the victim from the photo is actually participating in the video. 98% of these deepfakes are pornographic, and 100% of those target women. And then finally, according to the UN Women, 75% women and girls report experiencing some form of online or tech-enabled abuse. So all of this to say that the stats and what we're seeing, and I think just what our instincts probably tell us before I even gave this presentation, is that this is trending in a dangerous direction. That technology and our reliance on technology has resulted in just a very large spike in technology-enabled abuse, which makes sense. And then if you don't feel confident in addressing these issues, you're not alone, because 87% of domestic violence advocates don't feel totally confident in addressing it, and less than 1% of malicious cyber incidents see an enforcement action. So even though these incidents are rising, people, a lot of folks working with these victims don't feel comfortable or aren't addressing it in a meaningful way. So that really puts the onus on us to be savvy and to be addressing these things, especially now during the pandemic, that parents and teachers really need to be comfortable talking about these things, be up to speed on these things, and like I've said, talking about digital safety in a way that makes sense to students, which we're going to go through, because you can see, if you just said to somebody, well, do you feel digitally safe? Whatever. First of all, that's a loaded term that may mean different things to different people, and it's easy to just say, yeah, I feel, I'm safe online. But when you ask more specific, targeted questions, we've found that you can actually elicit or uncover issues that maybe even the teen or the student you're talking to was not aware of. So it's a really powerful way to open a dialogue. So during the pandemic, there are some trends that we want to talk about. One is there's a lot of device and account sharing going. And this is not just limited to teens, but because people are isolating, or maybe they're only allowed to see certain friends, or are sheltering in place, and as a result are spending more time with specific people. People tend to share their devices willingly, or share accounts, or yeah, I just use my account to log into class, or yeah, I think I got an email for that lesson plan. Let me just log into my email or something like that. You'd be surprised how willing people are to share access or provide access to their devices and accounts, and that's really dangerous because this is a quote from Eva Galperin, who works for the Electronic Frontier Foundation of San Francisco, and she said that full access to a person's phone is the next best thing to full access to a person's mind. And that, I wholeheartedly believe that slide where I showed all the different things that we and students and teens use our devices for, all those different apps and working and going to school and socializing. If somebody has access to that, they have access to our lives. And if they mean to do us harm, or an intimate partner means to do a student or a teen harm, that they can wield so much more power than if they didn't have access to that person's device. So again, just being aware of this, and I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but we don't have to get fancy or when we're talking about online safety. We're talking about good password management, making sure you have a PIN code that nobody else knows on your device, because truly the people that are seeking to harm us, or teens or students, are typically not cybersecurity experts or hackers. They're people that either have access to us because we're in a relationship with them, or for students, for example, it could be somebody they're in a relationship with, could be a friend, somebody who knows them, who is close to them, who has access to their accounts and devices, or access to information that allows them to impersonate them online with a great deal of authenticity. These are the things that we've learned from doing this work, and that's really good news, because that means that we don't have to engage the help of experts, or like this example of these two students that were lured by somebody online into an unsafe situation that happened in the community recently. That person didn't hack their devices. Okay, I'm making some assumptions here, but I am assuming that person didn't hack their devices to engage in this recruitment, or this ruse to try to lure them into a dangerous situation. They probably just connected with them on a messaging app or social media, and then manipulated them by pretending to be somebody else, and misusing that platform to engage in behaviors that could have put those two teens, or those two students, in harm's way. So that person's not, they're just misusing a platform to engage in behaviors that are, whether it's trafficking, human trafficking, or intimate partner violence, or stalking, or what have you. But they're not necessarily experts, and that, again, that's good news, because when we're talking to students and teens about how to be safe online, you don't have to worry about these sophisticated hacking attacks, right? You can just talk to them about, like you would if some stranger approached you on the street and started chatting you up and tried to, convince or persuade you to, or a student to go somewhere with them. They hopefully wouldn't do that, but talking to them about that, they know not to do that typically, because we're talking to them about that. But for some reason, when things go online, we feel safer. There's this effect that happens when people go online, that they feel safer. They feel like they do things, or they say things that they otherwise wouldn't if they were in person. You know, you see it all the time, for example, on social media, people, we call them trolls, where they go and they say horrible things to people on social media, things that they would never say if that person was physically in front of them. But because they've gone online, it's emboldened them. And I'm going to talk about this in the next slide. And for some reason, it creates this false sense of security for teens. So we need to continue having these conversations about strangers and people that we're meeting on the internet, or that are trying to connect with us on the internet. And you know, there are things that we can do. This is not part of the presentation that I was planning today, but if somebody, I've done this in other cases where someone says, hey, this person has befriended me, you know, I'm really vibing with them, but you know, they don't have a ton of friends on their account, and I don't know, there's, you know, some things that are a little fishy on there. One of the first things I'm doing is I'm taking that person's picture and I'm doing a reverse image search on Google. And I don't know if any of you are familiar with this, but you can just Google reverse image search and it'll take you there, and you can upload or put the link of a photo into this search bar, and then it will find everywhere on the internet that photo is publicly available. And when I've done that, I've seen that photo associated with multiple different accounts that purport to be somebody else. So we've dealt with people that are impersonating folks, or that, you know, yeah, well, primarily impersonation, or just they're not saying who they say they are. They don't live where they say they live. And we've also used it if they're just getting harassed by somebody with a photo that are trying to engage in some anonymous harassment. We've used the reverse image lookup. You can't do it for video, but you can do it for photo. These are not expert level things, but these are things that we can talk to students about. Like, look, if you're gonna, you know, try to get as much information about this person as you can. Be savvy about it. Do reverse image lookups and things like that to really verify who we're dealing with. Another thing about the pandemic is sexting is on the rise. As I mentioned, 1 in 4 teens is sexting these days, which is the exchange of nude or intimate images. And that's obviously very concerning, as I mentioned, because that can lead to image-based abuse or sextortion or things like that. So again, this is having these conversations. The success where I found had success is talking about you know, the impact and really making it real for them. That, look, this can impact your ability to go to school. This could impact your job prospects. This could you know, follow you around for the rest of your life. Just understanding that and sending that to somebody who you know, and you know, your partner in high school is just, I mean, you don't want to say this by saying, well, it's just a bad idea, don't do that. But it's also, you know, if an 18-year-old and a 16-year-old are sexting each other, well, now you're getting into child sexual exploitation, because that's an adult receiving nude photos or intimate photos of a minor. And that can get them into trouble, and that could result in criminal liability. So, and that's not even, I'm not even talking about an abusive relationship. It could be consensual. That's still not allowed. So really helping people understand that as well, that is a crime. And it's just it's become so normal and so not a big deal that I don't think people realize the impact. But when you say 1 in 12 people identifies as a victim of image-based abuse, and this is what the harm looks like, I hope that it will cause folks to pause, or teens to pause, or at least make an informed decision before they do something like that. Obviously, we can't control what they do, but what my hope is that information will at least make them wait a beat before they do something like that. The last thing I want to say, and this is, I sort of jumped ahead, but is emboldened attackers, because everybody's gone online, much like trolls. It's just becoming a lot. People are becoming more brazen and more confident in bullying or requesting nude photos. As I said, it's this normalization of exchanging nudes combined with a lack of accountability, or when you go online, that it's just easier to threaten somebody or say negative things about somebody on social media but doing it to their face is much more difficult. And so we're seeing, for example, on college campuses where students, male students primarily, are just asking their female classmates for nude images, just outright, because it just, they want it. It doesn't seem like a big deal to ask it online. Everybody seems to be exchanging nudes. So what's the big deal? And it is a big deal. And unfortunately, as we're going to talk about, a lot of students aren't taking that seriously enough because they're saying, well, I'm not going to run into that person on campus, so I'm not going to, I don't want to follow through with a restraining order or law enforcement or reporting it to the school or anything like that. And that is a very dangerous mistake because they are confusing their physical safety and digital safety, or they are prioritizing physical safety over digital safety. But if they don't feel safe going to a study group because they're concerned that that person is going to harass them or ask for nudes or send nudes to them without their consent, that might affect their academic performance. So, and that's solely around their digital safety. I debated whether including in this, but I feel like parents and teachers should know what kind of technology is out there and how it's being weaponized against young, primarily women. In fact, solely women. So this is an app that came out last summer that if you took a picture of a woman, any woman wearing anything, in this case, it's a woman taking a selfie in a bikini, this app will digitally disrobe and make it appear as though she's taking a naked photo, as you can see from the partially obscured photo on the right. It's hyper realistic. It uses artificial intelligence to basically replace nude body parts with very accurately similar body parts that from hundreds of thousands of nude photos that these artificial intelligence platforms have collected online. It doesn't work on men, it only works on women. It got taken down, but this is not going to be the last that we see of things like this. And just being aware of how gendered and this technology can become is, and look, there's not a whole lot we can do about something like this right now, because if somebody, except raise awareness that, look, this is not, this is a fake photo, this technology exists. And, I think I'm a big proponent of teens, if they're gonna have social media, make it private. The less, because even totally safe photos can now be manipulated by technology. So absolutely, and this goes to, the example of these two students being lured into an unsafe situation. I'm not saying if they have, I don't know if they have private social, if this happened on private, I don't know if this happened on social media, and I don't know if they had private accounts, but I can tell you that that's just one more barrier to a person. And these people that are committing these acts, they like easy targets, right? And if they try to see photos of somebody and the social media platform's private and they can't message the person directly because the person has adjusted their Instagram settings to not allow anybody to direct message them, then they're likely to be safer. And so that's again, this is a conversation to have, that look, yes, you've got a lot of photos out there, but limiting your digital footprint about how many photos you have out there. We don't know how we have a good idea, but we don't know exactly how future technologies are going to be manipulated to harm folks. But this is a good example of why it's important to minimize your online footprint and explaining it in a way that explaining the ramifications in a way that hopefully will resonate with a student or teen. How can parents and teachers anticipate and predict tech-enabled abuse? I talk about this all the time because, again, you don't have to be an expert to do this work. You can look at something, and we're going to go through some examples you can look at some technology and immediately discern what the risks are and how it could be manipulated to harm students or your child. And it starts by asking one question: how can this technology, so how can this app or dating site or smartphone or device or location tracker or software update, how can this technology be misused to harm a student or harm my child, whether that's misused to monitor or control or harass or extort or sextort or bully or threaten or humiliate or spread rumors or locate or otherwise harm. So how can this technology be misused to harm a student? And when you start looking at technology through that lens, I think the answers will present themselves. For example, screen recordings, and I'm seeing this across not just in schools, but in now like restraining order hearings and family law proceedings have gone digital, and they're public hearings. So these hearings are available, are being recorded and broadcast publicly. But if you think about it, and dating too, a lot of people are dating that, but that creates new risks. Does anybody, I might as well take a second here, but does anybody have any thoughts about about what kind of risks studying online or going to classes online or socializing or dating online via video, what kind of risks, any risks there that are presented that didn't exist before? And it's okay, I'm gonna go through them, but I'm curious if anybody wants to share, please feel free to do so. And you can just put it in the chat if you like. Okay, well, I will keep an eye on that chat. But the reality is the first thing that jumps out to me is screen recording. You can record, classes, or you couldn't do that before. You can record somebody in a class or a study group or on a date before, but now you can record these things and then you can publish that, you can edit it, you can show only portions of it to make somebody look bad, and you can publish private information about somebody designed to humiliate them or embarrass them. And these are risks. Or to take the example of the two minors that got lured into this dangerous situation online or via online contact, if they engage in a video chat with somebody now, because well, we can't see each other, but let's video chat, then they can see information that they otherwise couldn't. They might be able to discern where that person lives or collect information about that person through the video chat that wasn't possible before. And we see this with Bumble. So Bumble is I'm not saying teens are on this app, they shouldn't be on this app, but this is something to be mindful of, and I think it illustrates my point that Bumble created, because the reality is when I keep saying misusing technology to cause harm, it's usually beneficial technology that is used in a way that it's not intended to be used to cause harm. So in here, Bumble is a dating app where it used to be that you could just message and chat with somebody on the app. Then they added, when the pandemic came along, virtual dating, where now you can have video dates. And that, like I said, creates new risks that didn't exist before. Now you're letting somebody into your home on a first date, or when you're connecting somebody. It doesn't have to be, like I said, it could be on social media, it could be anywhere, but people are more apt to go virtual and engage via video chat than ever before. Here it puts pressure, so privacy violations about figuring out where somebody lives or learning information about them. Number two, it creates pressure, that didn't exist before on these dating apps, that especially for women, before they could just chat and they didn't have to give their full name and they didn't have to give their number unless they were comfortable. Now these videos exist, this option exists. And so there's pressure to use that option, and that when using that option, it creates new risks for them. And then we're seeing a higher degree or higher likelihood that nudes will be requested or exchanged, because now it's not happening via chat, it's happening via video. And people feel comfortable doing that, but then you can screen record or take screenshots of somebody without their consent, and now you're running into image-based abuse territory and extortion territory. Oh, and one other thing I want to mention about, I took this slide out, but I would have kept it in based on what happened about these two minors getting lured or groomed, is that the other thing that Bumble did is they added functionality where it used to say, well, you can only date within 25 miles or 50 miles of where you live. And they said, well, during the pandemic, you can date anywhere. So you can connect with somebody anywhere all over the country. And from a trafficking standpoint, or luring somebody into a dangerous situation, that really opens up the opportunities for people that want to do harm in that way. And that's very concerning to me. So a couple common forms of unhealthy behavior that I want to mention. First is, not surprising, accessing accounts and devices without permission. We see this quite a bit because the sharing of devices is becoming so common. And what happens when people do this? One, they will monitor their activity, that can monitor their calendars or who they're talking to, or their emails, or what they're watching on Netflix. I mean, just you can gain information in a variety of different ways. In fact, Google keeps track of a lot of information about you, and it keeps track of what websites you visit, your location if you're using their map app. And if somebody has access to your Google account or a student's Google account, they can learn a lot of information about them that can be misused to stalk and harass and harm them. Or then go and make an account change. Somebody can make account changes. They can update the contact information to their own so that when a security notification goes out, it doesn't go to the victim. Or they can go in, if they want to reset the password, it will send it to not the victim's email address, but the other person's email address. Or might just go in and change the password and lock somebody out of their accounts. Or they can go in and steal information or even or money, financial harm by, we use Venmo, and we use PayPal, and we use all these different things to send money back and forth, especially young folks. They use Venmo like crazy. And Venmo is a strange platform to me because it's got this social component where if you make your platform public, you can see what other people are paying each other and for what. And that is just, who needs that? That is just allows somebody to keep tabs on you in a different way. And it's actually a way to harass somebody. If you might have blocked somebody on your social media and your text message on your phone, but then they could still send you a bill or request payment on Venmo and include a note in there that's insulting or harassing or something like that. So it's really important to make sure that our devices and our accounts are secure, and that we're not giving access to those accounts to people that we really, unless we really trust them. And I would argue that no teen should be giving anybody their password or anything like that. And then location tracking is another one. All our devices become preloaded with ways to track us because so many of our apps and the devices themselves can have a geolocation or tracking feature. So and it doesn't necessarily have to be geolocation. You can you can go on somebody's calendar to see where they're going, or making plans via email or on social media. I mean, you don't even have to get into their accounts. You can just, if they're posting their location in real time on social media, you can see where they are and who they're with. App tracking. There's so many apps that use, if you use a rideshare app or a food delivery app or really any app that uses your location. If somebody has access to that, they can see where you're going or what you're doing. And then device tracking. Your phone has a Find My Phone feature where you can log into whether your Google account or your iCloud account, depending on what device you have, and say, hey, I lost my phone, where is it? And then if you have access to that account, you can see that person's location. So, location tracking, we're able to monitor people's locations in a way we never were before. And again, making students and teens and our children aware of this, that yes, you grew up with this and it's convenient and it's normal, and you can use Find My Friends to keep track of each other at a concert or at a party or whatever. Like, I get that, but appreciating how that can go sideways really quick, and how somebody can really take advantage of the trust you have with them by monitoring your location without your consent is something that I think we should be having that conversation with everybody should be having that conversation with, particularly young folks. As I mentioned, impersonation. Very likely, as I understand, the person that lured these minors into a potentially dangerous situation was not holding themselves out as the person they actually were. because it's very easy. Again, social media accounts, platforms, and email platforms do not require you to verify your identity. So you can make yourself out to be whoever you want using whatever photos you want on social media. And by the way, these platforms, if you tried to go after Instagram saying, hey, this person created a fake profile and tried to lure my child into an abusive situation, Instagram is going to say, not our problem, not our fault. We'll close that. We can shut, if you want us to shut that account down, we'll shut it down. But if you have an issue, you need to go after the person who created that fake account, because no tech platform has liability for what people do on their site. So you can't, if something terrible happens to a minor, they get bullied to the point where they are, attempt suicide or self-harm or something like that, and you pleaded with Facebook or Instagram to take those accounts down that were bullying the child, and they refused, you can't sue them or hold them accountable in any way, shape, or form for that. So that really emphasizes why we have to be having these conversations with our kids and our students about being safe online, because the tech platforms are not going to help, unfortunately. Impersonation also can happen where if somebody gets a hold of somebody else's device or can log into their account, then they can pretend to be that person. I worked on a case where it was two teens in a relationship, and there was jealousy, and one partner was constantly accusing the victim of cheating on them, and they got a hold of their phone and started messaging ex-boyfriends of the victim in an effort to determine whether they were cheating or not. And so one, it was impersonating. Two, it was just humiliating and embarrassing and a violation of privacy. But some of those ex-partners were also had been abusive to the victim in the past, and so they started messaging and harassing her too. So taking over one of the victim's actual device's accounts is one way, and creating fake accounts is the other. That this is a way to go in, you create an account and use their photo, and you can say hurtful things, you can pretend, you can monitor people, you can act as if, hold yourself out to be the victim, and do things that or engage in activities designed to cause reputational harm or intimidate or scare a victim. So impersonation is something that's very popular. And then finally, cyberbullying. And as I mentioned, this is name calling, this is threats, this is making fun of folks, this is spreading rumors, all happening on our devices. And like I said, it's a 24-hour cycle now, which is why we're seeing higher rates of depression among teens. We're seeing higher rates of suicide or self-harm thoughts. It's very tragic, and just underscores why, especially with bullying, we should be having these conversations, because it's not about the technology, it's about the behaviors. And as I mentioned, so I jumped ahead here, but and doxing, for those of you that don't know, I've got doxing/privacy here. Doxing is publishing information, private information about somebody without their consent. So if they have an anonymous account that they use to do something, or if they're a game, let's say I worked on this case where this young woman was a gamer, and she went by a screen name or a username, and she had a following, and her ex-partner published her actual name and email and phone number in an effort to harass her. And then people started contacting her and threatening her or propositioning her. So, violating somebody's privacy online can have pretty serious repercussions as well. And obviously I mentioned where we're spreading rumors online, they can just catch like wildfire. Here's some stats that from a platform called Bark. Bark is a platform for parents that monitors about 30 different social media channels of their children without violating the child's privacy, but it uses artificial intelligence to determine whether or not any, for example, and I'm not here to say use this or don't use this. It's just I think they comb through 830 million different social media posts and text messages to get these stats. And so they're pretty powerful stats, but you see here cyberbullying, for example, 76% of tweens and 78% of teens experiencing cyberbullying as bully, victim, or witness. And that's much higher than the 59% that I quoted in the earlier study. Mental health, 55% of tweens and 67% of teens engage in conversations about depression. Self-harm suicide, 35% of tweens and 54% of teens were involved in self-harm suicidal ideation. Finally, sexual content, 70% of tweens and 84% of teens encountered nudity or content of a sexual nature. That's 8 in 10 teens, approaching 9 in 10 teens. So this is not a situation where you don't want to give teens ideas by talking to them about image-based abuse or sexting. It's already happening. So we need to start talking to them about the ramification and the impact so that they can appreciate how dangerous those activities are. A lot of folks ask me, well, what about hacking or spyware or listening devices, things like that? That's really uncommon. Spyware or malware being installed on somebody's device to spy on them does happen, but it's pretty rare. GPS trackers, like spy level stuff, we're just not seeing it. Spy cams, listening devices, or hacking into somebody's smart device at home, like a smart speaker, or all less common, still very serious, but less common. I will say, I can't remember if I have this slide or not, no, but changing, if you're worried, and this just goes for everybody, but if you're worried that you're being spied on in your home or something like that, you update more likely than not, the device that may or may not be there is using the Wi-Fi in the house. So if you change the Wi-Fi password, then it will kick that device off. So that's just a really simple, straightforward. It doesn't have to be fancy, because a lot of these things aren't fancy because the person doing it is not an expert. They're just using off-the-shelf stuff using off-the-shelf but very sophisticated technology in the hands of somebody who's unsophisticated. But more often than not, we're dealing with misuses of technology, whether that be a health app. It's the way a health app has been shown up in some of my, it tracks your steps, it tracks your heart rate, things like that. So the steps thing, I was working on a case where, in a relationship with young people, with teens, and there was a jealous boyfriend, and he was accusing the victim of cheating and going out, sneaking out, and he would look at her health app to see how many steps she was taking in a day. And this was during the pandemic, so she shouldn't have been going very far. And if she was taking more steps than he thought were reasonable when staying at home, then he used that information to accuse her of leaving the house and cheating on him. I've seen meal delivery apps used to determine somebody's location. The Find My app, as I mentioned before, is something that has been used to falsely say, hey, I lost my phone, to determine somebody's location. And then finally, significant locations. If you have an iPhone and you have it out, go ahead and take it out. And if you don't, it's okay. I'm going to share my screen here in a second. But if you have an iPhone, do we have time to do this? Yeah, we've got a little time. So if you have an iPhone, go ahead and take it out and hit the settings icon. And once you've done that, once you hit the settings icon, scroll down till you see privacy. It's a little hand. It's a little blue hand and a white square, and hit, or blue square with a white hand, and hit privacy. And I'm assuming we've all hit privacy, and then hit location services right there at the top. And when you hit location services, I want you to scroll all the way to the bottom until you hit system services. And hit system services, and then scroll down about 3/4 of the way till you see significant locations. Hit significant locations. So settings icon, privacy, hit location services at the top, scroll all the way down to system services, hit system services, scroll down to see significant locations, hit that. You may have to enter your passcode or Face ID, and what you should see is this. On the left-hand side, if it's on, your iPhone is tracking everywhere you go. And in this circumstance, this person, this is in the Los Angeles area, If you click, oh, Marina Del Rey, one location from March 9th to April 27th. Well, if you click on that, it takes you to this screen. And it's a Trader Joe's. So that one location is a Trader Joe's. And it says, oh, 3 visits from March 9th to April 27th. If you click that, it shows each date of the visit, how long the person was at this location, and whether they arrived via car or not, and how long it took them to get there. That is incredibly powerful information that if somebody wanted to look inside your phone, they can't access it remotely, but if somebody wanted to look inside your phone, they could suss out where you've been and what your patterns are. Again, this is beneficial technology, but it can be misused to harm folks by saying, well, where were you? I want to see where you were, and those sorts of things. You can turn this off. You do not need to have this on. It says it's, you know, as you can see here, it allows iPhone and iCloud connected devices to learn places significant to you in order to provide useful location-related information, but you do not have to have this on. I keep mine on only for illustration purposes. So tech-enabled abuse is clearly a growing problem, yet parents and teachers report being overwhelmed and intimidated and sort of disempowered when faced with the prospect of addressing technology-enabled abuse or the dangers of the internet and online abuse and things like that. And you know, some folks say, well, I'm just not tech savvy. I'm not comfortable with technology. And I argue against that, because I think we can all, if we all took this little test and checked what we're familiar with or have used, I think we would check all of these. The internet, yes. Search engines, yes. Email, text messages, social media, Wi-Fi, smartphones, smart devices like smart speakers, computers. We know what passwords are. We know what location-based apps are, like Maps or Find My iPhone or Find My Phone or you know, rideshare apps. And then other apps, and what other apps do, music, shopping, social media, things like that. So, and these are the things, this is the base information we need. If we have an understanding of these things, then we can talk to students and teens about these issues, because that's where these things are happening. And again, it's not so much about the technology in that it's about the behavior, the underlying behaviors, and talking to teens and students about making smart decisions, whether they're online or offline. So here's another example of where you can use your tech savvy skill set, your existing tech savvy skill set. So for those of you who have Instagram, and I'll actually bust my phone out too and join you all on this. So go ahead and open your Instagram app. And I'll wait with you for a second. And I'll share my screen if you don't have Instagram to show you what this looks like. But once you've got your Instagram open, hit the bottom right-hand corner to go to your profile. And once you're at your profile page, there are 3 horizontal lines in the top right-hand corner. Go ahead and hit that, and that'll bring up a menu from the bottom, and hit Settings at the top. And when you hit Settings, go ahead and go down to Security. And tap Security. And now, before we take it any steps further, I want to say, let's say you're working with somebody who says, or talking to a student who says, yeah, I think my Instagram's been hacked because somebody has been posting things or sending messages or doing things in my account that I didn't consent to, and I'm sure someone's gotten into my account. I don't know how, but they're in there. We can actually help them determine whether somebody has accessed their account without their permission or consent. So, and this is how you do it. So once you're on the security page, go ahead and hit Login Activity. And that'll take you to this page. And this shows all the devices that are logged in to an Instagram account. And so you can say, well, okay, look, in this circumstance, yes, there's an iPhone logged in, and then one day ago, a Mac OS, which is a Mac operating system or a MacBook, logged in from Los Angeles, and on April 2nd, a Mac logged in. Do you have a Mac? Do you have a MacBook? And if the student or the teen or your kid says no, or you know that they don't because they're your kid, then somebody is logging into their account. And that not only verifies for them that they're not crazy and yes, something's going on, but also, and it can be used as evidence if you want to get a restraining order, go to law enforcement or something like that. But then it also, you can click on these 3 dots on the right and log that device out. And then I would recommend changing the password to the account. You know, People do not practice very good password management. We all do it. I don't anymore, but we all reuse passwords. And as I mentioned before, it's not that perpetrator, a lot of folks are intimidated by online safety, but it's not that perpetrators or people that are causing this harm are more tech savvy than us. It's because they have a personal connection to the student, usually through an intimate partner relationship or a friend or something like that, somebody like that. So it's not some stranger trying to harm them or get in their device. They don't have hacking skills, they just have opportunity. So when they're allowed to get into a partner's device or log into a partner's account or have access to that person's password, it's not hacking, it's just opportunity. It's betraying someone's trust to get access to their devices and accounts. And finally, they have or had the victim's trust, which gives them that access to passwords or personal information that they can use to reset password questions and things like that. So no, in the majority of cases, it's not some super cybersecurity expert. It's just somebody who knows the victim and has a personal connection, has personal information, and use that opportunity or use that trust to do them harm, whether it's impersonating them or tracking their location, accessing their devices without consent. Because remember, tech-enabled abuse doesn't have to be sophisticated to be dangerous. It's generally not some sophisticated, expert doing some very high-level hacking. It's contacting a minor on social media and pretending to be somebody else and luring them into a dangerous situation. There's no tech expertise going on there. It's just using technology to access victims where they are, which is, as I've said, online and on social media. And for parents and teachers, this is good news, because this means you don't have to be experts to act when technology is misused to harm a student, right? Somebody's, like I just showed you, you can talk to them about the implications of online abuse, like image-based abuse. You can do things like, well, let's go into the settings in your Instagram and see what devices are logged in to your account and see if that's not, we can all do that. These are all the type, we can be having these conversations with teens. I don't have all the answers, but then it's like, well, let's look in your settings and see, when's the last time you updated your password? Let's see if there's an area that shows login activity to see if somebody else is logged into your device. It doesn't have to be Instagram, it could be Google, it could be Apple, it could be some other device. So, again, it's just being comfortable and being open to making some mistakes, but having an open mind and getting into the settings on somebody's device. So if it's not that we're not tech savvy and it's not that perpetrators are more tech savvy than we are, then why do people feel less confident in dealing with tech-enabled abuse than they otherwise should? And the reality is, I think it has to do with the abuse, itself, that it's invisible. It's hard to get your arms around and figure out, someone says, yeah, I think somebody's logged in hacking my account. It's like, well, you can't see that. You have to dig a little bit. And then enforceability. Like I said before, that less than 1% of these actions are seeing an enforcement action. So because law enforcement is under-resourced to deal with this, a lot of folks can feel, well, if law enforcement's not able to deal with it, then what can I do? And then the anonymity of attacks makes it more difficult to know who's behind these things. And when they're anonymous, they have less accountability because they can say things or do things with relative impunity without fear that they're going to get in trouble for it. And then there's just, I think, a general lack of training and limited resources for parents and teachers around this stuff. And we're not talking about it enough, in my opinion. So that digital safety term that I mentioned before, we, as I said, really need to prioritize with teens and students, prioritize physical, emotional, and digital safety equally. That digital safety should be taking, not out in the front, at least a seat at the table here, because we're online so often that digital safety needs to be something that we're very comfortable thinking about and talking about. Because as I mentioned before, it creates a false sense of security. People that are online and aren't at risk of physical harm feel like they're safer when they're not, because their accounts and their well-being and their reputation and their location are all at risk if they're not digitally safe. So what does digitally safe mean? For me, it means three things. These are the three things you can talk about when you're talking to a student or a teen or a kid about this stuff. It's one, can you access your technology freely? Is somebody preventing you from accessing your device or your accounts? You know, if somebody's in a relationship and they're not allowed to go on certain sites, or they don't get to be on their phone when they're together, things like that. Is their access denied? And do they have control? Do they have control over those devices, accounts, and apps? Now I get it, you know, with minors, sometimes we put restrictions on what they can control. But you know, beyond that, can they control, do they have control, or is somebody else logged in? Or is somebody else controlling that account that the victim is using? So can they access their tech freely? Do they have control over their devices, accounts, and apps? And finally, are they able, even if the first two are true, are they able to exist online without limitation or fear? Or are they going to a study group and they have anxiety because they feel like someone's going to send a chat to them that's demeaning or humiliating or insulting? So if a student or a child doesn't meet all three, then they're not digitally safe. And it likely signals an underlying issue to explore with them. And this is what I meant before about being very deliberate in the questions that we're asking, so that we're not being overly general, but we're being specific so that they can really understand what we mean when we're talking about their digital safety. Some red flags. Student concern. We're so tapped into our technology that if we don't feel, if technology is running in the background of our lives all the time and we're very connected to it, and if something is off, very often a teen or a student or whoever, an adult, if they feel like they're being monitored, they feel like something's off, that is, we should pull on that thread. That is absolutely a red flag and a sign that they may not be digitally safe, or somebody might be in their accounts because they can't put their finger on it, or they feel like they're crazy, or yeah, my ex keeps showing up at parties that I'm at, that people they don't know, or showing up where I'm going, and they say, people keep telling me it's a coincidence, it's not a big small town or whatever, but this just doesn't feel right. If that's the case, then I would get to work on exploring that a little more deeply and talking to them about that, because that's not something I ever ignore. Another thing, I know I said spyware is not that common, but if the device is draining, the battery's draining quickly, or it feels hotter than normal, or it's shutting down or acting weird, that could be a sign that something's wrong with the phone, and that somebody may have installed something on the phone that's running in the background, causing the battery to drain very quickly, or more so than normal. So that's something to keep an eye on. And then finally, assisting students and teens to secure their digital lives. I feel like I've been talking about this the entire presentation, about things we can say and ways to talk to them about their digital safety and prioritizing it. But it does not, no need to get fancy here. Stick to the basics. And I'm talking about passwords. I'm talking about updating passwords. I know this probably sounds boring, but most people reuse passwords. Most people use passwords that are often easy to guess. And when the person that's trying to harm you knows you, that gives them access to multiple accounts. And so that's really problematic. And the keys to our digital lives, they're easy to steal. And so if you're working or talking to a student who's being abused or in an unhealthy relationship, I would assume their passwords are compromised. And that gives the person who has their passwords access to their devices and accounts, and really gives them an amplified ability to harm them. This is an example of somebody, and this is true for all of us, where there was a data breach with like Hilton or something like that, and this woman had a home security system through like Nest, and what somebody did was they took that, she reused her passwords all the time, and so from that data breach in Hilton, somebody got a hold of the email and username and logged into her home security system, or watching her and her like infant, and we're talking to her infant at nights with the camera's intercom feature, and then started insulting her and threatening her, and that was all due to the fact that she didn't update her password. So here's a great website. I know we're getting to the end here, but here's a great website for you to try out and then maybe share with a student or teen. If you type your email address into haveibeenpwned.com, so have I been and then pwned.com, haveibeenpwned.com, you enter your email address, it will tell you every data breach that email address has been associated with, and that doesn't encourage you to update your passwords. I don't know what else will. So I entered my professional email address and it said good news, no breached accounts found. But then I entered my personal email address, and there were 13 breach sites, including below Cafe Press and Canva. And so that really, one, it's an incentive to go secure those accounts or delete those accounts if you don't use them anymore, but it's also an incentive to update your password if possible. And the goal is to create unique and strong passwords that are never reused. So how do we do that? Because we have so many accounts and apps. Well, I recommend using a password manager. Password managers are an app on your phone that will create really difficult passwords, really strong passwords, and then autofill them on all your accounts for you. And you only have to remember one really powerful, strong password to your password manager. Alternatively, if you want to use phrases or sentences instead of birth, dates, information that is personal to you, try that. You can use full punctuation, or that could be a line from a song or a movie or something like that. Finally, personal relevance passwords are bad. They're what we've used historically, but they're high risk. They're often memorized, so we can't remember a bunch of different passwords for a bunch of different sites. So I'm a big fan of password managers. 1Password and LastPass are great choices. I encourage you to check those out. And then finally, the unique challenges that people experience when they're harmed online is, I just want to talk about this one, extreme helplessness. If you feel like somebody can get at you whenever you want, whether you're at school or you're at home, that they can do it anonymously. We really need to appreciate this about online abuse. It's this extreme helplessness that allows us to be really empathetic when someone's being harmed online, because unfortunately, online abuse can be looked at as, well, what's the big deal? They're not physically harming you. It's not happening that often. What's the harm? But the harm is, we've seen this tech-enabled trauma is very real, and extreme helplessness is really problematic. And that's due to as I mentioned, somebody is able to do this anonymously, and it's very difficult to uncover who they are. The person being attacked may have been convinced that they don't have tech savvy, or they lack tech savvy. And as I mentioned before, Facebook and Instagram are not going to do anything about this. They might take the account down, but they're not going to hold that other person accountable. And that underscores the importance of really empathy and prevention and talking to teens and students about this. It's right on the button at the end here. I'm happy to stay on a little longer for questions. I actually can no longer see the chat for some reason, so I might need help if there are any questions via the chat. But if you have any questions, you can email me at adam@ntab.org. And I talk about these issues a lot on social media, on Instagram and LinkedIn and Twitter, and I'm at Adam R. Dodge on those platforms. But if there's any questions, I'm happy to stick around, or if you come up with something later you want to ask me, feel free to shoot me an email. I'm happy to discuss it then too.
Adam, there are a few comments.
Okay.
So we have one that's, knowing that human traffickers have their victims attend schools to recruit other boys or girls, it would give perpetrators access to images of possible victims.
Yes, true. That's why look, I guess this also, one, I think that underscores the idea around trying to keep social media profiles private, but also, we also have to be realistic about what we can and cannot do. There are some things we can't control. We can't ensure that somebody won't be targeted with a trafficking campaign 100% of the time. Much like we can't ensure that our accounts will never be compromised or hacked. The CEO of Twitter, Jack Dorsey, had his Twitter account hacked. He's the last person that should happen to, but it happened. And so I think when we start having these conversations about digital safety and knowing who you're friends with on social media and knowing who these people are and being mindful about what you share with them, because we're discussing what the ramifications are when these things go sideways or can go happen, what can happen, what the order of magnitude of the harm is. I think, at least in my experience, adults and teens sort of appreciate that, the risks a little bit more, and might be a little more mindful moving forward about the decisions they make online.
Okay, and then we have perhaps online dating cannot really be the person who is on the photo, but trying to lure a person.
100%. Absolutely. And that goes into where if you do that reverse image search on Google with that photo, I think everybody should do that whenever they're dating online. They should take steps to verify that person. They should Google that person's name. They should Google that person's email address. I know that can sound a little, maybe that sounds a little extreme, but I've just seen, especially, people who might be, young folks and women, you should definitely know who you're engaging with before you agree to give your phone number out or meet that person or engage in a video date and let that person into your life, because the opportunity to mask who you really are or catfish somebody or just use an alternate ID or impersonate somebody, it's very easy to do, which is why I included impersonation in one of the main reasons, most common forms of tech-enabled abuse.
Awesome. And that looks like those were the only comments.
Okay. Well, like I said, if anybody wants to reach out or email me or contact me on social media, all that information's there, and I'd love to hear from you.
Awesome. Thanks, Adam.
Sure.
Let's see. And thank you for all the attendees for attending the session this morning. We're going to end the broadcast now. Adam, we'll see you back here at 1.
Sounds good.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.